I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. When the officer pulled us over on that rainy night in Vermont, my cousin Sarah smiled sweetly at him while slipping my will into her designer purse. She had no idea I'd carefully prepared for this moment for months, or that the young officer who approached our car window was someone I'd watched grow up in my neighborhood for 20 years. My name is Eleanor Woodson. At 73, I've learned that gray hair makes some people think you've lost your mind along with your natural color. What my cousin Sarah didn't realize was that behind my wrinkles and gentle smile lies a woman who built a multi-million-dollar construction company from the ground up after my husband died. The rain pounded against the windshield as Sarah tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "Just let me do the talking," she whispered harshly. "Remember what the doctor said about your confusion?" I nodded meekly, playing the role she expected. In my pocket, my fingers closed around the small button I'd pressed moments earlier, the one that sent a silent alert to people who actually cared about me. You see, this wasn't just a routine traffic stop. This was the culmination of months of planning, both mine and Sarah's. But only one of us would win this chess match. It all began 6 months earlier, on a crisp autumn morning when my doctor confirmed what I'd suspected. Severe arthritis in my hands and a heart condition that required careful medication. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but enough to make Sarah suddenly appear in my life after years of only holiday cards and occasional bitter remarks at family funerals. "Eleanor, I came as soon as I heard," she exclaimed, arriving at my doorstep with a casserole and a concerned expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You shouldn't be alone at a time like this." At 61, Sarah was my younger cousin, the daughter of my uncle who had bitterly contested my grandfather's will decades ago. Our families had maintained a Cold War ever since, with occasional flare-ups at weddings and funerals. Sarah had always looked at my comfortable life with barely disguised envy. "Thank you, Sarah. That's very kind," I said, genuinely surprised by her appearance. "But I'm doing fine. Kate checks on me regularly." "Kate is young and busy with college," Sarah replied, already making herself at home in my kitchen. "She can't possibly provide the care you need. Besides, what does a 19-year-old know about managing medications and doctor appointments?" Kate was my granddaughter, the light of my life. After losing my daughter and son-in-law in a car accident 12 years ago, I'd raised Kate myself. Now she was in her first year of pre-med at Boston University, brilliant and compassionate like her mother. "Kate knows more than most," I said, a touch of pride in my voice. "She's studying medicine, after all," Sarah waved dismissively. "Theory isn't practice. You need someone with life experience, someone who understands what you're going through." As Sarah busied herself reorganizing my perfectly organized kitchen cabinets, I watched her with quiet suspicion. In our family, sudden kindness usually came with strings attached. "I've been thinking," Sarah continued, not looking at me. "I could come by a few times a week, help with groceries, drive you to appointments. It must be getting difficult to manage on your own." I glanced down at my hands. The arthritis made some days painful, but I'd adapted. My home had been modified years ago with aging in mind my late husband's foresight. I was perfectly capable of independence. "That's very thoughtful, but unnecessary," I replied. "I have a network of friends and neighbors who help out." Sarah turned, her eyes narrowing slightly before her face relaxed into a smile. "Don't be stubborn, Eleanor. This is what family is for." Over the next few weeks, Sarah's help became increasingly intrusive. She insisted on driving me to doctor appointments, hovering during consultations, and asking pointed questions about my prognosis. She rearranged furniture without permission to prevent falls. She brought over her son Mark, a lawyer I'd never particularly liked, to discuss some paperwork. Mark was 35 with an expensive suit and a condescending smile that reminded me of his grandfather. "Aunt Eleanor," he said, though we weren't that closely related. "Mom's concerned about your situation. We should talk about getting your affairs in order." "My affairs are perfectly in order," I replied calmly. "I updated my will after Richard died, and again when Kate started college." "But things have changed," Mark insisted. "Your health situation creates new considerations. Have you thought about who will make medical decisions if you become incapacitated, or who will manage your finances?" Kate is my medical proxy, I said. And I have a financial advisor I've worked with for 20 years. Mark and Sarah exchanged a look I didn't like. Kate is barely an adult, Sarah interjected. That's a heavy burden to place on someone so young. And what does she know about managing a construction company or property investments? I felt a chill that had nothing to do with my circulation. How do you know about my investments? Sarah laughed too quickly. You've always been the successful one in the family, Eleanor. Everyone knows you're comfortable. But comfortable and knowing the specifics of my business holdings were very different things. I'd always been private about my finances, a habit from building a business in a male-dominated industry where women were often underestimated. That night, after they left, I called Kate. Grandma. Her voice was warm, instantly lifting my spirits. I was just about to call you. How was your checkup? The doctor says I'm stubborn but stable, I chuckled. How are your classes? We chatted about her biochemistry professor and her roommate's disastrous attempt at cooking. I didn't mention Sarah's visit. Kate had enough on her plate without worrying about family drama. But as I prepared for bed that night, an uneasy feeling settled over me. Sarah's sudden appearance and interest in my affairs felt calculated. I'd spent enough years in business negotiations to recognize when someone was prospecting for opportunity. The next morning, I made a call to my old friend Martha Peterson. Eleanor, what a lovely surprise, Martha answered. We'd been friends for 30 years, through marriages, widowhood, and raising children. Her son James was now the chief of police in our small Vermont town. Martha, I need some advice, I said, keeping my voice casual in case Sarah dropped by unexpectedly. It's about family matters. Martha understood immediately. We arranged to meet for coffee at her house rather than the cafe we usually frequented, in Martha's cozy living room, with no chance of being overheard. I explained my concerns. She's suddenly very interested in my health and finances. I concluded, and something doesn't feel right. Martha's expression had grown increasingly troubled. Eleanor, this happens more often than people realize. Older adults with assets sometimes become targets, even from family members. You think Sarah is after my money? The words felt harsh, but saying them aloud crystallized my suspicions. I think it's worth being careful, Martha replied diplomatically. Have you noticed anything else unusual? Missing statements, suggestions about changing your will or power of attorney? I thought about Mark's questions regarding who would manage my finances. Not yet, but I think that's where this is heading. Martha reached for her phone. I'm calling Thomas Wheeler. He's the best elder law attorney in 3 counties, and he's discreet. Thomas Wheeler agreed to meet me the following day at Martha's house. At 65, he had the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every type of family dispute imaginable. The most important thing, he advised, is to not sign anything without independent legal review, not even if they pressure you or make you feel guilty. I built a construction company from the ground up, I replied with a small smile. I'm familiar with pressure tactics. He nodded approvingly. Good. Now, let's review your current documents and make sure everything is airtight. Over the next 2 hours, we went through my will, medical directives, and power of attorney documents. Everything was in order, but Thomas suggested a few updates to strengthen Kate's position as my heir and medical proxy. I'll also prepare a document outlining your current mental competency, he added, just in case anyone tries to suggest you're not capable of making decisions. Do you really think it could come to that? The idea was disturbing. I hope not, Thomas said grimly. But in my experience, when money is involved, people can convince themselves of almost anything. As I left Martha's house, she handed me a small device that looked like a key fob. James suggested this, she explained. It's a panic button that alerts his department directly, just in case. I slipped it into my purse, thanking her but hoping I'd never need it. The following week, I caught Sarah in my home office, rifling through my filing cabinet. Looking for something? I asked, making her jump. Oh, Eleanor, you startled me. She clutched a folder to her chest. I was just organizing your medical records. You really should have a better system. I extended my hand. May I see what you found so interesting? Reluctantly, she handed over the folder. It wasn't medical records at all. but rather the deed to my house and property. Simple mistake, she said with an unconvincing laugh. Everything looks the same in these old folders. I smiled politely, but that night I installed a small lock on the filing cabinet. The next day, I had a locksmith change all my external door locks as well. When Sarah arrived and found her key didn't work, her friendly facade cracked slightly. "Why would you change the locks without telling me?" she demanded. "There was an attempted break-in down the street." I lied smoothly. "Martha suggested everyone update their security." Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she quickly recovered. "Well, you'll need to get me a new key. What if you fell and couldn't reach the door?" "I have a medical alert system," I replied. "And Kate has a key." "Kate is 2 hours away," Sarah snapped, then composed herself. "I'm just worried about you. Eleanor." That evening, I decided to test a theory. I left my medication bottles on the kitchen counter empty, having transferred the actual pills to unmarked containers hidden in my bedroom. I also left a notepad with some absent-minded notes about feeling confused and having trouble remembering things. The next morning, Sarah arrived unannounced, letting herself in with the new key I'd reluctantly provided. "Just checking on you," she called. "Did you take your morning medications?" I shuffled into the kitchen in my robe, playing up the frail elderly role. "Good morning, Sarah. Yes, I think I did." Or was that yesterday? Sarah's eyes lit up almost imperceptibly. "Let me check your pill organizer. It's easy to get confused with so many medications." She examined the bottles I'd left out, frowning at the dosage information. "These don't seem right. Let me call the pharmacy for you." "That's very kind," I murmured, hiding my suspicion as she made a call in the other room. That afternoon, after Sarah left, I took one of the pills she'd organized for me to an independent pharmacist friend for identification. "This isn't what's prescribed on the bottle," he confirmed gravely. "The original is your heart medication, but this is a mild sedative that could cause confusion and drowsiness, especially in older adults." Cold anger settled in my chest. So that was Sarah's game: impair my cognitive function to make me seem incompetent, then swoop in to protect my assets. I needed proof and a plan. The next day, I had a security company install hidden cameras in my main living areas. I also reached out to Kate using our private code. At the end of our regular calls, I always said, "Love you to the moon and back?" For emergencies, we'd established that love you to the stars and beyond meant trouble. "Love you to the stars and beyond. Katie," I said at the end of our next call. There was a brief pause. "Is Sarah there now?" she asked casually. "Yes, that's right. The weather is lovely for October." "Got it. I'll call Martha right away. Don't worry, Grandma. Text me checkmate if things escalate." The next day, Sarah brought Mark over again. This time, they had documents. "We've been thinking," Sarah began, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Your confusion seems to be getting worse." "Does it?" I asked innocently. "Mom mentioned you couldn't remember taking your medications," Mark interjected. "And the other day you thought it was 2010. I had said no such thing, but I merely looked confused. "Did I?" "How strange." "It happens to everyone eventually." Sarah patted my hand condescendingly. "That's why we've prepared these documents. Just some updates to your power of attorney, giving me authority to help manage things when needed." Mark slid papers across the coffee table. "It's all standard. Just gives Mom the ability to make decisions if you're unable to. Medical, financial, that sort of thing." I peered at the documents, deliberately taking time. "This says durable power of attorney. That means it takes effect immediately, not just if I'm incapacitated." Mark looked surprised at my clarity. "Well, yes, but that's just for convenience. So Sarah can help with day-to-day matters without bothering you. Like my banking, my company decisions, my property." I continued to scan the document, noting how comprehensive their grab for control was. "You've seemed overwhelmed lately," Sarah said, a hint of frustration creeping into her voice. "We're just trying to help." "I appreciate that," I said, setting the papers down. "But I'd like my own attorney to review these first." "Your attorney," Sarah's voice sharpened. "Who?" "Thomas Wheeler," I replied calmly. "He's handled my affairs for years." Mark's expression darkened. "Wheeler is semi-retired, And these are simple documents. There's really no need for another lawyer to review them. Nevertheless, I'd prefer it, I insisted. Sarah and Mark exchanged glances. Of course, Sarah finally said. We just thought you'd want this handled quickly, given your situation. After they left, I immediately called Thomas and scanned him copies of their documents. This is worse than I expected, he said after reviewing them. This would give Sarah complete control over everything you own, and these clauses about necessary medical care could potentially be used to force treatments or even placement in a facility against your wishes. They're not getting my signature, I assured him. Good, but be careful, Eleanor. When people like this get desperate, they sometimes escalate. Thomas's warning proved prescient. The next day, Sarah arrived with a woman she introduced as Dr. Larson, a specialist in geriatric care. I've been so worried about your memory issues, Sarah explained. Dr. Larson can do an evaluation right here at home. Isn't that convenient? The woman looked professional enough, but something felt off. May I see your credentials? I asked politely. Dr. Larson seemed startled by the question. Of course, she said, fumbling in her bag for a business card. I examined it carefully. And you're affiliated with which hospital or practice? I have a private practice, she replied smoothly, specializing in home evaluations for seniors. How interesting. Do you know Dr. William Chen? He's the head of geriatrics at Vermont Medical Center. Dr. Larson hesitated. I don't believe I've had the pleasure. That's strange, since he chairs the state board that certifies all geriatric specialists. This was a bluff. I had no idea if such a board existed, but the flash of panic in her eyes confirmed my suspicion. Perhaps we should reschedule, she said, gathering her things quickly. I just remembered another appointment. After the fake doctor left, Sarah was furious. Why are you being so difficult? We're trying to help you. By bringing an unqualified stranger to evaluate my mental capacity, I challenged. Who is she really? Sarah. A medical professional. You're becoming paranoid, which only proves my point about your mental state. I changed tactics. You may be right, I said, slumping my shoulders. I've been feeling confused lately. Perhaps I should rest. Sarah's anger immediately transformed into satisfaction. Yes, that's a good idea. We can discuss the paperwork when you're feeling more yourself. That evening, I called Kate again. Things are escalating, I told her after confirming Sarah had left. They brought in someone pretending to be a doctor to evaluate me. That's illegal, Kate exclaimed. Grandma, let me come home this weekend. No, I said firmly. Stay at school. I have Martha and Thomas helping me. But I need you to do something important. Anything. Contact my doctor, Dr. Chandler Reynolds. Tell him what's happening and ask him to document my recent visits showing I'm mentally competent. He can't discuss my case with you, but he can prepare records for me to collect. Consider it done, Kate said. And Grandma, be careful. 2 days later, Sarah took me to what she described as a routine checkup with a new doctor. Dr. Reynolds is so overbooked, she explained. Dr. Morris can see you right away. The office looked legitimate, but I'd never heard of this doctor. When Sarah tried to accompany me into the examination room, I put my foot down. I prefer to see the doctor privately, I insisted. The nurse supported me. Family members can join after the initial examination, if the patient wishes. Alone with Dr. Morris, I was direct. My cousin made this appointment without my knowledge. I have a primary care physician I'm very happy with. He looked uncomfortable. Your cousin expressed concerns about your cognitive function. She requested an evaluation. Did she? And who would receive the results of this evaluation? Well, as your caregiver. She is not my caregiver, I interrupted firmly. I live independently and manage my own care. I believe this visit was arranged under false pretenses, possibly to support a legal effort to control my assets. Dr. Morris looked alarmed. That's a serious accusation. It is, and I'd like you to document in your records that I declined this unrequested evaluation and appeared fully oriented and competent during our interaction. When I emerged from the examination room, Sarah was waiting anxiously. What did the doctor say? Did he do the memory tests? We had a very informative conversation, I said vaguely. He took excellent notes. Sarah's repeated attempts to get me to sign the power of attorney documents grew more aggressive over the next week. She began making comments within earshot of neighbors about my deteriorating condition and safety concerns. She also started answering my phone and screening visitors, telling several longtime friends I was too tired for company. One evening, I overheard a disturbing phone conversation between Sarah and Mark from my hidden spot in the hallway. "She's being stubborn," Sarah hissed. The fake doctor was a mistake she saw right through it. "We need to move faster," Mark replied, his voice tinny through the speaker. "The longer this drags on, the more likely that granddaughter gets suspicious. Do you have access to her financial accounts yet?" "Not yet. She keeps her statements locked up, and she won't sign the POA. But I've been adjusting her medication. She's getting foggier. Yesterday she couldn't remember what day it was. I hadn't been foggy at all. I'd been pretending, testing Sarah's reactions." "Good," Mark said. "Keep increasing the dosage gradually. Once she's impaired enough, we can get her evaluated by our doctor. With a declaration of incompetence, we won't need her signature. What about Kate? She calls every day. Once we have control, we'll limit communication. Say Eleanor's condition makes conversations too confusing. We'll handle the brat." My blood ran cold. They weren't just after my money, they intended to cut me off from Kate completely. I slipped back to my bedroom and immediately texted Kate. "Checkmate." Within minutes, she called. I took the phone into the bathroom and turned on the shower for privacy. "I'm coming home tomorrow," Kate said, her voice tight with worry. "No," I replied firmly. "That's what they expect. We need to be smarter than they are." "Grandma, they're trying to drug you." "I know. I haven't actually taken any of the pills Sarah's been giving me, but we need evidence of what they're doing, and we need to catch them red-handed." I outlined my plan. Kate would come home for Thanksgiving as originally scheduled, just a week away. In the meantime, I would continue to play along, appearing increasingly confused while documenting everything. "Martha's son has been informed," I assured her. "And Thomas has prepared all the legal countermeasures we need." "I don't like leaving you there with her," Kate protested. "I've outsmarted tougher opponents than Sarah," I reminded her. "Your grandfather used to say I was the best chess player he'd ever met, and this is just another game of chess." The next morning, I deliberately knocked over my coffee cup, appearing startled and confused by the spill. Sarah watched with poorly disguised satisfaction as I fumbled with paper towels. "Let me help you," she said, taking over the cleanup. "These little accidents happen more frequently now, don't they? Do they?" I asked vaguely. "I don't recall," Sarah smiled. "That's all right. That's why I'm here." Later that day, she suggested a drive. "It's such a beautiful afternoon. We could go see that specialist I told you about in Burlington." "What specialist?" I asked, genuinely confused by this new tactic. "The memory doctor. Remember we discussed it yesterday." We had discussed no such thing, but I nodded slowly. "Oh, yes, of course." As we drove toward Burlington, I noticed we were taking an unfamiliar route. "This isn't the way to the medical center," I observed. Sarah patted my knee. "We're not going to the medical center. Eleanor, we're seeing a private specialist, Dr. Hoffman. He's excellent with cases like yours." I had a sinking feeling about where we were really headed. "Is his office far?" "Not too far. In New Hampshire, actually. New Hampshire, where Mark lived. This wasn't a doctor's appointment. They were taking me across state lines, away from my support network and the legal protections Thomas had established in Vermont. I needed to act. With my hand in my pocket, I pressed the panic button Martha had given me. Then I carefully took out my phone. "Do you mind if I check the time?" I asked innocently. "I need to take my afternoon pills soon." Sarah glanced over. "Use my phone if you need to." "Yours is so complicated with all those apps." "No, I can manage," I insisted, opening my phone and activating the emergency recording app Kate had installed. I placed the phone in my lap, still recording. "Sarah," I said conversationally, "where are we really going?" "I told you to see Dr. Hoffman." "There is no Dr. Hoffman, is there?" "We're going to Mark's house." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Why would you say that? Of course we're seeing a doctor." "Sarah, I know what you and Mark have been planning. The drugged medication, the fake doctors. The attempt to declare me incompetent. She laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. You really are getting confused. Then why do I have laboratory confirmation that the pills you've been giving me contain sedatives not prescribed by my doctor? Why do I have recordings of you and Mark discussing how to get control of my assets? Sarah's face paled. You're making things up. I also have copies of the falsified power of attorney documents Mark prepared, with notes from my actual attorney highlighting their illegal provisions. You're bluffing, Sarah said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Just like you were bluffing about Dr. Larson's credentials or Dr. Morris's independent evaluation. I pressed, I've documented everything, Sarah, and copies are with my attorney, with Martha Peterson, and with Kate. Sarah's composure cracked. You think you're so clever. Always the successful one. Always looking down on the rest of the family. Do you have any idea what it's been like living in your shadow? Uncle Robert left everything to your father, and our family got nothing. That was 60 years ago, Sarah. The effects lasted generations. Your father had the capital to start businesses, to send you to college. My father worked at a gas station until the day he died. And now you're doing the same thing, leaving everything to Kate while the rest of the family gets nothing. Kate is my granddaughter, the only family I raised after my daughter died, I replied calmly. What claim do you have to my assets? We're blood relatives that should count for something. Blood relatives who tried to drug me and steal my company, who planned to cut me off from Kate and possibly put me in a facility against my will. Sarah was becoming increasingly agitated. You need supervision. You're not safe alone. Pull over, Sarah. What? Pull the car over now. I'm not going to New Hampshire with you. Don't be ridiculous. I'm trying to help you. As we argued, flashing lights appeared in the rearview mirror. A police cruiser was signaling for us to pull over. Sarah cursed under her breath but guided the car to the shoulder. Now look what you've done, she hissed. Just let me handle this. As the officer approached, I recognized Ryan Peterson, Martha's son, who had followed us at a distance after receiving my panic signal. License and registration, please, he said professionally, giving no indication he knew me. Sarah fumbled in her purse, accidentally revealing the corner of some legal documents. I recognized my will, the one I kept in my home office. She must have taken it while I was in the bathroom. Is everything all right here? Ryan asked, looking between us. Where are you ladies headed today? Taking my cousin to a doctor's appointment, Sarah said smoothly. She has memory issues, so I'm helping out. Ryan looked at me. Ma'am, are you Eleanor Woodson? Yes, I am, I replied clearly. And you're heading to a doctor's appointment. I made eye contact with Ryan and said the code phrase we'd established, yes, with Dr. Fields in Bedford. Ryan's expression didn't change, but he understood. There was no Dr. Fields in Bedford. Would you mind stepping out of the vehicle, ma'am? He asked Sarah. I need to check something with your registration. As Sarah reluctantly got out, Ryan positioned himself so she couldn't see when he discreetly showed me a small UV light. I nodded slightly. Actually, he said, turning back to Sarah, I noticed you seem to have some documents partially visible in your purse. In light of a recent report we received about potential elder financial abuse, I'm going to need to see those papers. That's private property, Sarah protested. You have no right. Ma'am, if you refuse, I'll need to detain you while I obtain a warrant, which I assure you will be granted quickly given the nature of the report we received. Trapped. Sarah reluctantly retrieved my will from her purse. It's just my cousin's will. She asked me to take it to her lawyer for updates. Ryan accepted the document and returned to his cruiser, where I knew he would examine it under the UV light. Thomas and I had prepared for this possibility, marking the real will with a special ink message that would only appear under ultraviolet light. If found outside my possession, this document was taken without consent. Contact Thomas Wheeler, attorney. When Ryan returned, his demeanor had changed from routine traffic stop to formal police business. Ms. Sarah Collins, I'm placing you under temporary detention pending investigation of elder abuse, attempted fraud, and theft of legal documents. You have the right to remain silent. As Ryan continued reading Sarah her rights, I sat quietly in the passenger seat, feeling not triumph, but a profound sadness. Families should protect each other, not exploit vulnerability for gain. When backup arrived, Ryan approached me privately. "Mrs. Woodson, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" "No, I'm fine. Ryan, thank you for your quick response. We'll need formal statements, but that can wait until tomorrow. Where would you like to go now? I can have an officer drive you home." I thought for a moment. "Actually, could you take me to your mother's house? I think I could use a friend right now." As I was escorted to another police vehicle, Sarah was being placed in the back of Ryan's cruiser. Her face was a mask of fury and disbelief. "This isn't over, Eleanor," she called out. "Mark will fight this. You'll see what happens when you turn against family." I turned away, not giving her the satisfaction of a response. This battle was won, but the war for justice was just beginning. Martha was waiting on her porch when the police car delivered me to her home. She rushed down the steps, enveloping me in a warm hug that contrasted sharply with Sarah's false embraces. "Eleanor, thank God you're safe," she murmured. Ryan called ahead. "Come inside Kate's on her way from Boston." As we settled in Martha's living room with cups of tea, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened and what had nearly happened. My hands trembled slightly, the first genuine show of weakness I'd permitted in months. "They were going to take everything," I said quietly. "Not just my money, but my freedom, my connection to Kate, my dignity." Martha reached over and squeezed my hand. "But they didn't, because you're the strongest, smartest woman I know." I managed a small smile. Chess was always my game, anticipating the opponent's moves before they make them. "Checkmate," Martha said, raising her teacup in a toast. Yes, I thought checkmate indeed, but as any good chess player knows, winning one game doesn't end the tournament. Mark was still out there, and this was just the opening gambit in what promised to be a complex match. When Kate arrived 2 hours later, bursting through Martha's door with tears streaming down her face, I knew that whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. And in that moment, surrounded by true family, the kind defined by love rather than blood, I felt richer than any inheritance could ever make me. When Kate burst through Martha's door that evening, her face streaked with tears, the full weight of what had nearly happened hit me. She threw her arms around me with such force that we nearly toppled backward in the armchair. "Grandma," she sobbed into my shoulder. I was so scared. I stroked her hair the same chestnut waves her mother had, and felt my own composure start to crack. For months, I'd been the chess master, calculating moves and counter-moves, never allowing myself to fully process the betrayal. "I'm all right," I assured her, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thanks to our planning." Kate pulled back, wiping her eyes and transforming instantly from frightened granddaughter to fierce protector. The determination in her expression reminded me so much of my late daughter that it took my breath away. "What happens now?" she asked, looking between Martha and me. "They can't just get away with this." Martha handed Kate a cup of tea. "Ryan has taken Sarah to the station for processing. They'll likely release her on bail, but she'll face serious charges: attempted fraud, elder abuse, unauthorized possession of legal documents." "What about Mark?" Kate demanded. "He was behind all this too. We have the recordings," I reminded her. "And Sarah might be willing to implicate him to save herself." Kate's expression darkened. "I should never have left you alone with her. I knew something felt off." "You did exactly what I needed you to do," I assured her. "If you'd come home early, they would have accelerated their plans. We needed evidence." The next morning, Thomas Wheeler arrived at Martha's house with a thick folder of legal documents. Despite being allegedly semi-retired, he looked energized by the case, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Sarah was released on bail last night," he informed us, "but she's been ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from you and your property. I've also filed for a more comprehensive protective order." "Will the charges stick?" Martha asked, voicing what we were all wondering. Thomas spread several documents on the coffee table. "The evidence is substantial. The tampered medication alone is a serious offense. Add the falsified power of attorney documents, the recordings of their conversations, and Sarah's attempt to transport Eleanor across state lines against her will." He looked up with grim satisfaction. "Yes, the charges will stick." What about Mark? Kate pressed. He's a lawyer. He'll know how to wiggle out of this. Being a lawyer might actually make his situation worse, Thomas replied. The Bar Association takes a very dim view of attorneys who use their knowledge to exploit vulnerable individuals. I've already filed a complaint with the Ethics Committee. I leaned forward, examining the papers. And my assets, my company, secure, Thomas assured me. I've notified all relevant financial institutions and your company's board about the situation. Nobody will be able to access or transfer anything without multiple verifications. As we discussed next steps, Ryan Peterson called with an update. Sarah had been formally charged, and investigators had seized computers and documents from Mark's home and office. More concerning, they'd found notes about a nursing facility in New Hampshire, evidence that supported my suspicion about their ultimate destination that day. One more thing, Ryan added. Sarah's asking to speak with you. Eleanor. Says she wants to explain. I wasn't surprised. Sarah had always been skilled at manipulation, presenting herself as misunderstood when cornered. Not yet, I decided. Let her sit with the consequences for a while. After the call, Kate insisted on returning to my house to collect clothes and personal items. You shouldn't stay there alone until we're sure it's safe, she argued. You can come back to Boston with me, or stay with Martha. I'm not leaving my home, I said firmly. Sarah and Mark don't get to drive me out of the house I shared with your grandfather. Martha and Kate exchanged concerned glances. Then I'm moving back in until this is resolved, Kate declared. I can attend classes remotely for the rest of the semester. Absolutely not, I replied. You're not interrupting your education. I didn't set up that college fund for you to abandon medical school because of Sarah's schemes. In the end, we compromised. Kate would return to Boston, but Martha's daughter Jennifer would stay in my guest room temporarily. As a retired nurse, Jennifer was both good company and capable of handling any medical concerns legitimate ones, not Sarah's fabrications. When we arrived at my house, I was struck by how violated it felt. Sarah's presence lingered, a coffee mug in the sink, her reading glasses on the side table, a cardigan draped over a chair. Kate moved through the rooms like a storm, gathering these items and stuffing them into a bag, for evidence. She rearranged your medications, Kate called from the bathroom, her voice tight with anger. And look, she installed a nanny cam disguised as an air freshener. She was spying on you. I wasn't surprised. The cameras I'd installed had been well hidden, but I'd suspected Sarah might have her own surveillance. Bag it for Ryan, I instructed calmly. Everything is evidence now. That evening, after Kate reluctantly returned to Boston with promises to call twice daily, Jennifer helped me reclaim my space. We changed the sheets Sarah had slept on, rearranged furniture back to my preference, and thoroughly inspected the house for any other surveillance devices. It feels like an exorcism, Jennifer commented as we worked. In a way, it is, I agreed, removing all traces of a malevolent presence. 3 days later, as life was beginning to resume a semblance of normalcy, the first legal bombshell dropped. Mark had filed an emergency petition for guardianship, claiming I was suffering from rapidly progressing dementia and was being manipulated by Kate and Martha. It's preposterous, Thomas assured me over the phone. We have extensive medical documentation of your competency. This is a desperate ploy. But we still have to fight it, I noted, recognizing the strategy. Even without merit, the petition would force me to defend my mental capacity in court, a humiliating and stressful process. We do, Thomas acknowledged. And they know that. They're hoping the stress will affect your health, or that you'll agree to a settlement to avoid public scrutiny. They don't know me very well. Then, I said, steel entering my voice. I didn't build a construction company by backing down from bullies. The next day brought another unwelcome development. Reporters from the local paper had somehow gotten wind of the case. Prominent businesswoman Eleanor Woodson in elder abuse case. The headline read, the article was factually correct but sensationalized, emphasizing the shocking family betrayal angle. My phone began ringing incessantly. Old business associates, distant relatives, concerned neighbors. I let most calls go to voicemail, but answered when the board chairman of my company called. Eleanor, the board is behind you 100%, he assured me. But we should discuss damage control. Some clients are concerned. Schedule a board meeting for tomorrow, I instructed. I'll address everyone directly. When I arrived at the company headquarters the next morning, the first time I'd been there in weeks, I was struck by the expressions of the employees. Some looked uncertain, others sympathetic, a few openly supportive. My assistant Clara rushed forward to hug me, whispering, "We've missed you so much." In the boardroom, I faced the 12 directors squarely. Most had worked with me for years, but business concerns could sometimes outweigh personal loyalty. "I understand you have questions," I began. "The situation with my cousin has become public in a way none of us would have wished. But I want to be absolutely clear. I am mentally and physically capable of continuing my duties as majority shareholder and chairman emeritus of this company." I laid out the facts succinctly, Sarah and Mark's scheme, the evidence we'd gathered, the legal proceedings underway. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Gregory Winters, our most conservative board member, spoke up. "Eleanor, we've known each other for 30 years. Not once in that time have I seen you make a decision that wasn't thoroughly reasoned and ultimately beneficial for this company. If you say you're being targeted, I believe you without reservation." His support opened the floodgates. One by one, the directors expressed their confidence and outrage on my behalf. By the end of the meeting, we had not only reaffirmed my position, but established a contingency plan for company operations should the legal battle require more of my attention. Leaving the building, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My company, the legacy I'd built with Richard and hoped to eventually pass to Kate, was secure. That sense of security was short-lived. The next morning, Jennifer received a call that shook both of us. "Eleanor," she said, her face pale as she hung up. "That was Mom. Sarah showed up at her house an hour ago, demanding to speak with you. When Mom refused, Sarah threatened to expose your history of mental instability to the press." My stomach clenched. There was no such history. But Sarah knew that mud, once thrown, leaves stains even when wiped away. "Martha called the police, but Sarah left before they arrived." Jennifer continued. "Mom thinks she'd been drinking." I immediately called Thomas, who promised to notify the authorities about the violation of the protective order. Then I called Kate, knowing she would hear about it eventually and not wanting her to worry unnecessarily. "That's it," Kate declared after I explained the situation. "I'm coming home this weekend, and I'm staying until this is resolved." This time, I didn't argue. Sarah's escalation suggested she was becoming more desperate and unpredictable. 2 days later, Kate arrived with a determined expression and 3 large suitcases. "I've worked it out with my professors," she announced. "I can complete most coursework remotely, and I'll commute for labs twice a week." As she unpacked, I noticed she'd brought medical textbooks, her laptop, and most telling, the framed photo of her parents that usually sat on her dorm room desk. She was settling in for the long haul. Having Kate home brought both comfort and concern. Her presence was a balm, but I worried about the impact on her studies. When I expressed this, she fixed me with the same stubborn look her mother used to give me. "Grandma, you raised me after Mom and Dad died. You put your life on hold to give me stability and love. Now it's my turn to be here for you. Besides," she added with a glint in her eye, "this is basically a real-world practicum in geriatric medicine and medical ethics." That evening, as we sat in the living room reviewing legal documents Thomas had sent over, the doorbell rang. Kate tensed, immediately protective. "I'll get it," Jennifer said, peering through the peephole before opening the door. "It's Ryan." Ryan Peterson entered, still in his police uniform, his expression grave. "Evening, Mrs. Woodson, Kate. Sorry to disturb you, but we've had a development." He explained that Sarah had been arrested again, this time for violating the protective order and making threats. During processing, they'd discovered text messages between her and Mark discussing plans to discredit me publicly. They're planning to contact former employees, business rivals, anyone who might have an axe to grind. Ryan explained. "Looking for stories they can twist to support their narrative about your mental state." Kate's face flushed with anger. "That's character assassination." "It's also getting them in deeper legal trouble," Ryan noted. Every text is more evidence of a coordinated campaign. After Ryan left, promising increased patrols near the house, Kate paced the living room like a caged tiger. "We can't just wait for them to attack next," she fumed. "We need to be proactive." She was right. Playing defense had given Sarah and Mark too much control of the narrative. It was time to change strategies. The next morning, I contacted Diane Mercer, a respected journalist who had covered my company's growth years ago. Unlike the reporters currently sensationalizing the case, Diane was known for her thorough research and balanced reporting. "I'd like to tell my side of the story," I told her, "with documentation to support every claim." Diane agreed immediately. 2 days later, her feature ran in the Sunday edition of the state's largest newspaper. The headline was simple but powerful. "Eleanor Woodson speaks out the truth about alleged elder abuse." The article methodically dismantled Sarah and Mark's claims, supported by statements from my doctors, business associates, and community leaders who had known me for decades. It included carefully selected excerpts from the recordings we'd made of Sarah and Mark's conversations, and expert commentary on the growing problem of elder financial abuse nationwide. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang constantly with messages of support. The district attorney's office called to confirm they were expanding the investigation to include Mark as a co-conspirator. Even the nursing home in New Hampshire issued a statement clarifying they had no legitimate intake paperwork for me and were cooperating with authorities. Sarah and Mark's plan was unraveling publicly, but I knew better than to underestimate desperate opponents. The guardianship hearing was still scheduled, and they would be pulling out all stops to present me as incompetent. Thomas arranged for me to undergo a comprehensive cognitive assessment with an independent geriatric specialist, Dr. Eliza Thornton. Her evaluation was unequivocal. Mrs. Woodson demonstrates above-average cognitive function for her age group, with no signs of impairment in decision-making capacity or judgment. Armed with Dr. Thornton's report and our substantial evidence, we prepared for the hearing. The night before, Kate found me in Richard's old study, looking through our wedding album. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly, sitting beside me on the leather sofa. "Just gathering strength from good memories," I replied, turning a page to reveal Richard in his Air Force uniform, young and handsome, gazing at me with undisguised adoration. "Grandpa would be proud of how you've handled all this," Kate said, leaning her head against my shoulder. "He taught me to stand my ground," I murmured. "When we started the company, competitors tried to intimidate us because I was a woman. Richard always said, 'Show them your steel, Ellie.'" Kate smiled. "You've definitely shown your steel." The guardianship hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the county courthouse. Thomas had advised me to dress conservatively, but not too formally. "We want you to look like yourself, not like you're trying too hard to impress." I chose a navy blue suit I often wore to board meetings, with a simple pearl necklace Richard had given me on our 25th anniversary. Kate wore a professional dress that made her look older than her 19 years. Every inch the future doctor. As we walked up the courthouse steps, flanked by Thomas and Martha, reporters called out questions. I kept my eyes forward, back straight, expression composed, showing no weakness they could exploit. Inside, the courtroom was more crowded than I'd expected. In addition to the usual legal personnel, several elderly rights advocates had come to observe the proceedings. I recognized a few faces from my community work over the years. Then Sarah and Mark entered with their attorney, a slick-looking man with an expensive suit and practiced smile. Sarah avoided my gaze, but Mark stared directly at me, his expression a mixture of calculation and resentment that reminded me powerfully of his grandfather during our family's original property dispute decades ago. The judge, an older woman named Patricia Galloway, entered and called the court to order. The proceedings began with Mark's attorney presenting their petition, painting a picture of me as a once capable woman now declining rapidly, being influenced by opportunistic friends and a granddaughter who was too young to understand the complexities of elder care. When he described me as confused and paranoid, I maintained my composed expression, though my hands tightened slightly on my purse. Kate, less practiced at hiding her emotions, visibly bristled beside me. Then it was Thomas's turn. With methodical precision, he presented our evidence, my recent cognitive assessment results. documentation of Sarah's tampering with my medication, the recordings of her conversations with Mark, statements from my physicians and business associates, and the police reports detailing Sarah's violation of the protective order. Your Honor, Thomas concluded, this petition isn't about Mrs. Woodson's welfare. It's a transparent attempt to gain control of her substantial assets by manufacturing a crisis that doesn't exist. Mrs. Woodson is not only competent but has demonstrated remarkable clarity and foresight in protecting herself from exploitation. Judge Galloway turned to Sarah and Mark's attorney. Counselor, the evidence presented strongly suggests your clients have engaged in potentially criminal behavior toward Mrs. Woodson. Do you wish to respond? The attorney conferred briefly with his clients before standing. Your Honor, my clients have acted out of genuine concern for their relative. If their methods were overzealous or misinterpreted, they nonetheless stemmed from a place of family duty. Judge Galloway's expression made it clear she wasn't buying this explanation. I'm prepared to rule on this petition, she announced. But first, I'd like to hear directly from Mrs. Woodson. All eyes turned to me as I approached the witness stand. After being sworn in, I faced the judge squarely. Mrs. Woodson, she began, in your own words, please tell the court about your current living situation and health status. I spoke clearly and confidently, describing my daily life, my medical conditions which were being properly managed, and the support system I had in place. I explained my company's succession plan, my financial arrangements for Kate's education, and my ongoing community involvement. And what is your understanding of why we're here today? Judge Galloway asked. We're here because my cousin Sarah and her son Mark attempted to gain control of my assets by manipulating me, drugging me, and trying to have me declared incompetent, I replied evenly. When that failed, they resorted to this guardianship petition as another avenue to the same goal. That's a lie, Sarah suddenly burst out, rising from her seat. We were trying to help you. You've always been selfish, Eleanor, always thinking you're better than the rest of the family. Ms. Collins, control yourself or you will be removed, Judge Galloway warned sharply. Sarah subsided, but the damage was done. Her outburst had revealed more about her motivations than any testimony could have. After a brief cross-examination that Thomas had thoroughly prepared me for, I returned to my seat. Kate squeezed my hand, her expression proud. Judge Galloway didn't deliberate long. I find no evidence whatsoever to support this petition for guardianship, she declared. On the contrary, Mrs. Woodson has demonstrated clear competence and has taken appropriate measures to manage her health and affairs. This petition is denied. She paused, looking directly at Sarah and Mark. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for further investigation into potential charges of attempted exploitation of an elder. This court will also forward all evidence to the State Bar Association regarding Mr. Collins's involvement. Relief washed over me, but the victory felt hollow as I watched Sarah's face crumple. Despite everything, she was still family, and seeing her destroyed brought me no joy. As we left the courtroom, reporters swarmed around us. Thomas fielded most questions, but one reporter called out directly to me, Mrs. Woodson, do you think justice has been served? I paused, considering. Justice isn't about punishment, I finally answered. It's about protection, protecting the vulnerable, protecting the truth. Today, the court protected both. Back at home, surrounded by Kate, Martha, Jennifer, and Thomas, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, a profound weariness settled over me. The hearing had been won, but the damage to family relationships was irreparable. What happens now? Kate asked as we gathered in the living room. Sarah and Mark will likely face criminal charges, Thomas explained. The evidence is substantial, particularly regarding the medication tampering and the attempted transport across state lines. I'm not sure I want to press forward with criminal charges against Sarah, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me in surprise. Grandma, after everything she did, Kate protested, justice doesn't always mean punishment. I repeated my words from earlier. What Sarah did was wrong, but sending my cousin to prison won't heal our family's wounds. What are you suggesting? Thomas asked carefully. I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences, I clarified. But perhaps there's a middle path, one that protects me while offering Sarah a chance to understand the harm she caused. Over the next week, Thomas worked with the district attorney to explore alternatives. Eventually, a potential resolution emerged. Sarah could enter a pre-trial diversion program that included mandatory therapy, community service with elder care organizations, and strict monitoring. In exchange, the most serious charges would be held in abeyance, to be dismissed if she successfully completed the program. Mark's situation was different. As an attorney who had abused his professional knowledge, he faced not only criminal charges, but disbarment. No amount of intervention from me could or should shield him from the professional consequences of his actions. When I informed Kate of my decision to support the diversion program for Sarah, she was initially resistant. "She tried to drug you, Grandma. She wanted to lock you away and take everything you've worked for. How can you even consider giving her a second chance?" I took Kate's hand. "When your mother and father died, grief nearly destroyed me. But I had to find a way forward for your sake. Sometimes healing requires letting go of the right to retribution." Kate's expression softened slightly. "I don't think I could be that forgiving." "It's not forgiveness, exactly," I clarified. "It's recognition that Sarah's actions came from a place of deep-seated resentment that began long before either of us was born. Breaking that cycle matters more to me than punishment." 2 days later, I received an unexpected letter from Sarah. The handwriting was shaky, the paper tear-stained in places. "Eleanor," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. The bitterness I've carried all these years poisoned me, and I nearly destroyed you because of it. The diversion program you've supported is more mercy than I deserve." She went on to explain that she had begun therapy and was confronting the generational trauma our families had perpetuated. "Mark won't speak to me now," she wrote. "He blames me for the collapse of his career, though it was his idea to pursue your assets so aggressively. I'm losing my son the way our families lost each other decades ago." The letter ended with a request. "I don't ask to be part of your life again, but I hope someday to have the opportunity to apologize to you in person. And to Kate, who has been nothing but loyal to you." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. It wasn't time yet for such a meeting. Trust once shattered couldn't be restored with a single apology, no matter how sincere. But as I looked out my office window at Kate tending the garden her grandfather had planted, the garden I had maintained through widowhood and now shared with my granddaughter, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps the first tentative step toward healing for all of us. The legal battles weren't over. Mark was fighting the charges and the bar complaint with desperate intensity.